They had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They were tall beings with silver skin and 4 arms. Their ships traveled between 900 star systems. Their cities floated above clouds. Their technology was the most advanced in all of known space. At least, that is what they believed. High Scholar stood in his office on Prime, the of his people. He was old, even by standards. His silver skin had turned gray at the edges. He had spent his whole life studying the past. He knew more about ancient history than anyone alive, but the message on his screen made him feel like he knew nothing at all. The message came from a survey ship at the edge of explored space. The ship had found a planet in a place called the Dead Zone. For millions of years, strange radiation had kept everyone away from this region. No one went there. No one wanted to go there. But this survey ship had better shields than older vessels. They had gone in, and they had found something impossible. Read the report 3 times. Then he read it again. The words did not change. The survey team had found ruins on that dead world. Not small ruins, not simple buildings. They had found cities carved into mountains. They had found machines still working after millions of years. They had found orbital stations hanging in perfect position above the planet as if someone had put them there yesterday. The technology in those ruins was beyond anything they had ever created. Their best engineers could not understand how any of it worked. The power sources alone would have changed everything they knew about energy. This was not just advanced. This was impossible. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was the age of the ruins. Carbon dating and geological surveys all said the same thing. These ruins were 60 million years old. 60 million. The civilization was 12,000 years old. These builders had created wonders when the ancestors were still swimming in warm seas. Commander Grant received the same message on her ship, the Starward Hope. She was human, one of the few who served in the auxiliary fleet. Humans were a minor species in the galaxy. They had only learned to travel faster than light 300 years ago. They had helped them, guided them, treated them like younger siblings who needed protection. Was 34 years old with short brown hair and eyes that had seen too much space. She had fought in 3 border conflicts. She had earned her command through skill and courage. But they still looked at her like she was a child playing with adult toys. All humans felt this way. They were tolerated, not respected. She shared the intercepted message with Dr. Moore, was a man who studied alien ruins. He was 50 years old with gray hair and glasses that he did not really need anymore. Medical technology had fixed his eyes long ago. He wore the glasses out of habit. They made him feel like a scholar. Had spent his whole life trying to understand human history. The problem was that human history did not make sense. Humans adapted to new planets faster than any other species. Human technology advanced at rates that seemed wrong. Old star maps found on dozens of worlds showed Earth at the center, like a hub in a great wheel. No one could explain any of this. When read the report from the Dead Zone, his hands began to shake. She looked back at him. Neither of them spoke for a long time. The survey team made one more discovery before the High Council ordered them to stop. Deep beneath the largest city, they found a sealed chamber. Inside that chamber were biological samples, preserved in some kind of stasis field that still worked after 60 million years. The team ran DNA tests on those samples. They ran the tests 5 times because they could not believe the results. They ran them 5 more times because the results terrified them. The builders of those impossible ruins, the creators of that godlike technology, the civilization that had existed 60 million years before they learned to make fire, they were human. Not similar to humans, not related to humans. They were human. The DNA was a perfect match. High Scholar sat alone in his office for a long time after he finished reading. Everything he had ever believed was wrong. They were not the eldest children of the stars. They were not the most advanced civilization to ever exist. They were latecomers. They were children playing in the ruins of giants. And those giants were human. On the starward Hope, Moore stared at the data on his screen. Tears ran down his face. He did not know why he was crying. Perhaps it was joy. Perhaps it was fear. Perhaps it was the weight of 60 million years pressing down on his shoulders. Put her hand on his shoulder. She did not say anything. There was nothing to say. The galaxy had just changed forever. The small, young, unimportant humans were not what everyone thought they were. They were something else entirely, something ancient, something powerful, something forgotten. And now, after 60 million years of silence, the truth was finally coming out. The Great Hall of the High Council had stood for 8,000 years. Its walls were made of crystal that sang when the wind blew. Its ceiling showed a map of every star system the Dominion controlled. For generations, the leaders of the had gathered here to make decisions that shaped the galaxy. They had always done so with pride and confidence. Today, that confidence was gone. High Archon sat on his throne at the center of the hall. He was the supreme leader of the Dominion, the most powerful alive. His silver skin was darker than most, a sign of noble blood. His 4 arms rested on the arms of his throne. His face showed nothing, but inside he was afraid. The report from the dead zone lay before him. Every member of the council had read it. No one wanted to speak first. No one wanted to say out loud what they were all thinking. If the report was true, then everything they believed about themselves was a lie. Finally, High Archon spoke. His voice was calm and cold. He said that the report was clearly wrong. The tests must have been contaminated. The dating methods must have failed. Humans could not have built those ruins. Humans were a young species. Humans needed help to survive in space. The very idea that humans had once ruled the stars was absurd. He ordered the survey team to return home. He ordered all data from the mission to be classified at the highest level. He ordered High Scholar to write a new report, one that said the ruins belonged to an extinct alien species with no connection to humanity. The truth would be buried. The lie would become official history. Listen to these orders in silence. He had served the Dominion his entire life. He had always believed in truth and knowledge. Now he was being asked to lie. He was being asked to hide the greatest discovery in galactic history. His 4 hands curled into fists beneath his robes. On Earth, humans went about their daily lives. They did not know what had been found. They did not know that their leaders were already receiving coded messages about the discovery. Admiral Bate Carson, the highest-ranking human in space, sat in her office reading one such message. She was 60 years old with white hair and a face full of scars from old battles. She had fought hard to earn her position. The respected strength in Bate Carson was strong. But even she was not prepared for what she read. Ancient human ruins, technology beyond anything known, DNA evidence that could not be, and now they were trying to hide it all. Bate contacted Commander Grant through secure channels, told her everything. She told her about Moore and his theories. She told her about the sealed chamber and the biological samples. She told her about the fear in the eyes of the survey team when they realized what they had found. The truth could not be contained. On the survey ship, a young researcher named had the data before it was classified. He believed in science. He believed that truth belonged to everyone, not just to those in power. Late one night, he uploaded fragments of the report to the Galactic Information Network. Within hours, the story spread to 1,000 worlds. Within days, it reached every corner of the galaxy, the government, everything. They called it a hoax. They called it human propaganda. But the data was real. The images were real. The DNA results were real. And people everywhere were starting to ask questions. Why did humans adapt so quickly to new environments? Other species took generations to adjust to new planets. Humans did it in years. Why did human technology advance so fast? 300 years ago, humans had no space travel. Now they were building ships that impressed even engineers. Why did ancient star maps show Earth at the center of everything? Moore worked day and night, studying every piece of data he could find. The more he learned, the more he understood. The ruins in the dead zone were not unique. Similar artifacts had been found on dozens of worlds over the centuries. Strange structures that did not match any known civilization. Odd energy readings that no one could explain. Each time, they had dismissed these findings as natural formations or simple errors. Now knew the truth. They had been finding human artifacts for centuries, and they had been destroying them. High Scholar could not live with the lie. He contacted Commander Grant through hidden channels. He told her things that made her blood run cold. This was not the first cover-up. For hundreds of years, the Dominion had been hiding evidence of ancient humanity. They had buried ruins. They had erased records. They had silenced anyone who asked too many questions. They were not just denying the truth. They were afraid of it. They had built their entire civilization on the belief that they were the greatest species in the galaxy. If humans had once been greater, if humans had existed for millions of years before they even evolved, then what did that mean? What else had they been wrong about? Sent and everything he had, secret files, hidden records, the locations of buried ruins across the galaxy. He knew he was committing treason. He knew the punishment would be death. But he was a scholar. Truth was more important than his life. On 100 worlds, humans looked up at the stars and wondered, who were they really? What had their ancestors been? And why had they forgotten? The answers were waiting in the darkness of the dead zone, and soon they would find them. The planet had no name. The survey team had simply called it Site Alpha. Commander Grant stood on its surface and felt the weight of 60 million years pressing down on her. The ruins rose around her like the bones of a dead god. Towers reached toward a gray sky. Streets stretched into the distance, empty and silent. Everything was too big, too grand, too impossible to be real. But it was real. She was standing in it. Her human feet walked on stones that human hands had placed before the dinosaurs died on Earth. The joint expedition had arrived 3 weeks ago. Half the team was human. Half was who had rejected their government's lies. High Scholar led the group. He had given up everything to be here. His titles, his position, his safety. The Dominion had declared him a traitor. He did not care. He was a scholar, and scholars lived for moments like this. Dr. Moore had not slept in days. He moved through the ruins like a man possessed, scanning everything, recording everything, trying to understand. The technology here was beyond anything he had ever imagined. Power sources that produced energy from nothing. Materials that should not exist according to known physics. Machines that still worked after 60 million years of silence. Deep beneath the largest tower, they found what they were looking for. A door made of something that was not quite metal opened when approached it. The systems inside recognized his DNA. They had been waiting for someone like him for 60 million years. The archive was a vast chamber filled with light. Holographic displays floated in the air. Data streams flowed like rivers of stars. The amount of information stored here was greater than everything they had ever recorded in their 12,000 years of history. And it was all in a language that could somehow read. He did not know how he could read it. The knowledge just appeared in his mind, like memories he had always had but never accessed. Watched in amazement as began to translate. The scholar recognized some of the linguistic patterns. They were similar to the oldest languages, the ones that predated their recorded history. The connection was clear. They had learned to speak from humans millions of years ago. A young pilot named Danny joined them in the archive. He was 28 years old with red hair and a quick smile. He had volunteered for this mission because his grandmother had told him stories when he was a child. Stories about humans who had once lived among the stars. Stories about a great war and a great sacrifice. He had always thought they were just fairy tales. Now he knew they were memories. The archive told them everything. The truth was more amazing and more terrible than any of them had imagined. Humanity had not started on Earth. They were ancient beyond measure. At their peak, they had been a Type III civilization, a species that could use the energy of entire galaxies. They had spread across the universe. They had built wonders that spanned dimensions. They had seeded life on countless worlds, guiding the evolution of thousands of species. They were one of those species. Millions of years ago, humans had found the ancestors of they had helped them grow. They had taught them language and science and art. They had been like parents raising children. Dozens of other species across the galaxy had similar origins. They were all children of humanity, whether they knew it or not. But 65 million years ago, something terrible happened. An enemy came from beyond the boundaries of known space. The archive called them the Void. They were beings of pure destruction, drawn to the light of living universes like moths to a flame. They wanted to consume everything. They wanted to end all life, all energy, all existence. The war was catastrophic. Entire galaxies burned. Billions of humans died fighting. The younger species, and others, were too weak to help. They would have been destroyed in moments. So humanity made a choice. They would protect their children no matter the cost. They enacted something called the Great Silence. They destroyed their own records. They dismantled their own technology. They scattered their population to primitive colony worlds and programmed themselves to forget everything. Earth was one of those colonies. The humans there were designed to start over, to rebuild slowly, to remember nothing of what they had been. But the genetic potential remained. Deep in human DNA, the abilities of their ancestors still slept. That was why humans adapted so fast. That was why human technology advanced so quickly. The programming was still there, waiting to be activated. The archive contained one final message, a warning. The Void had not been destroyed. They had only been driven back, pushed into the darkness between realities. The ancient humans knew they would return someday, so they left behind 300 years ago, the archive's sensors had detected signs that the Void was waking up. That was when the buried programming activated. That was when humans suddenly developed faster-than-light travel. It was not an accident. It was not luck. It was the plan working exactly as designed. Moore stood in the center of the archive, tears streaming down his face. Danny sat on the floor, staring at nothing. Grant held onto a wall for support. Even, who had lived for 300 years, looked like a child who had just learned that monsters were real. The Void was coming, and humanity was the only thing standing between them and the end of everything. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every world heard the truth. Every species learned what they had hidden for so long. The reaction was chaos. On Prime, the Dominion fractured. Half the population refused to believe the reports. They called it human lies. They demanded war against the species they had once thought of as younger siblings. The other half accepted the truth and did not know what to do with it. Their entire history was built on a foundation of pride. That pride had turned to dust. On Earth and the human colonies, people struggled to understand what they were. For 300 years, they had been a minor species. Now they learned they were the oldest civilization in the galaxy. They were the creators, the builders, the ones who had seeded life across the stars. It was too much to accept. It was too big to understand. Admiral Bate Carson worked day and night to prevent war. Human separatists wanted to break away from They wanted revenge for centuries of being treated as lesser beings, wanted to destroy the evidence and silence anyone who had seen it. The galaxy stood on the edge of a conflict that could burn for generations. But something else was happening, something no one had expected. Dr. Moore noticed it first. After spending time in the archive, he began to change. Knowledge appeared in his mind without warning. He would look at a complex machine and suddenly understand how it worked. He would hear a language he had never studied and know what it meant. Abilities that had been locked away in his DNA were waking up. The same thing happened to Danny. The young pilot found that he could interface with the ancient technology. Ships that had not moved in 60 million years responded to his touch. Weapons systems that engineers could not even power on activated when he walked into the room. His grandmother's stories had not been fairy tales. They had been genetic memories, passed down through generations. Reports came in from across the galaxy. Humans everywhere were experiencing the same awakening. A farmer on a colony world suddenly knew how to read the ancient script. A child on Earth drew pictures of machines she had never seen. An old man in a hospital began speaking a language that no living person should have known. The archive was more than a library. It was a key. When humans with the right genetic markers accessed it, it began a process of restoration. The ancient architects had designed it this way. They knew that sudden restoration would be dangerous. A person who gained all their ancestors' knowledge in one moment would go insane. So the process was slow, graduated, spread across many people. Commander Grant made a crucial discovery while exploring the outer regions of Site Alpha. Hidden beneath a mountain range, she found a map. It showed the locations of other archives across the galaxy. Dozens of them. Each one was a key. Together, they formed a network that could reactivate ancient human defense systems. Weapons that had lain dormant for 60 million years were waiting to be turned on. The implications were staggering. Somewhere out there, hidden in the dark spaces between stars, were weapons powerful enough to fight the void. The ancient humans had not just hidden themselves. They had prepared for the day when they would need to fight again. High Archon received reports of the awakening with growing fear. He had tried to bury the truth. He had tried to maintain the old order, but the old order was dying. Every day, humans grew stronger. Every day, more of them accessed the ancient knowledge. Soon, they would not need protection anymore. Soon, they would be something else entirely. He made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He contacted Admiral Bate Carson and asked for a meeting. They met on a neutral station between and human space. The High Archon was old and tired. His silver skin had lost its shine. His 4 arms hung heavy at his sides. He looked at the human admiral and saw not an enemy, but a possible ally. He spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. He said that they had been wrong. He said they had let pride blind them to the truth. He said that if humanity was truly the creator and protector of then perhaps the old relationship could be renewed. Perhaps they could face whatever was coming together. Bate Carson listened without interrupting. When the High Archon finished, she did not gloat. She did not demand apologies. She simply nodded and said that the galaxy was bigger than old grudges. The enemy coming for them did not care about or humans. It wanted to destroy everything. They would need to stand together or fall apart. High Scholar watched the meeting from a distance. He felt hope for the first time in months. The old order was dying, yes, but something new was being born, something that might be strong enough to survive what was coming. At the edge of explored space, long-range sensors detected something strange. A disturbance in the fabric of reality itself. Something vast was moving in the darkness between galaxies. It was still far away, but it was getting closer. The void was waking up, and it was heading toward them. Moore stood at a window on Site Alpha, looking up at the stars. He could feel the change in himself. He was becoming something more than he had been. All humans were. The ancient programming was working. The children of Earth were remembering who they really were. He hoped they would remember fast enough. 1 year had passed since the discovery at Site Alpha. The galaxy had changed more in those 12 months than in the previous 1,000 years. Ancient facilities across 100 worlds had come online, responding to human operators as if no time had passed. Ships of impossible power rose from hidden hangars. Weapons that could destroy stars hummed with dormant energy, waiting to be used. Dr. Moore stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn, an ancient warship that had slept beneath Site Alpha for 60 million years. He was not the same man who had first read those reports in Commander Grant's quarters. The awakening had changed him. Knowledge flowed through his mind like water through a river. He understood things that no human had understood in millions of years. But he was still more. He still wore his old glasses. He still loved bad coffee and old books. The ancient programming had not erased who he was. It had added to him, made him more. All the awakened humans were the same. They were still themselves. They were just themselves with the knowledge of giants. Admiral Bate Carson commanded the combined fleet. Human vessels flew alongside warships. Ships from a dozen other species joined them. The alliance had grown in the past year. When the truth came out, many species had searched their own histories. They had found evidence that they, too, had been touched by ancient humanity. They were all children of the same parent. High Scholar served as the liaison between the old order and the new reality. He had written the new history himself. They were not conquered by humanity, he wrote. They were raised by humanity, as parents raise children, with the hope that one day those children would stand on their own. Captain Danny sat at the controls of the Eternal Dawn. The ancient ship responded to his thoughts. He could feel its systems like extensions of his own body. His grandmother would have been proud. The stories she told him had been true, all of them. The void arrived on a Tuesday. There was no warning. One moment the edge of explored space was empty. The next moment it was not. A darkness spread across the stars like ink spreading through water. Sensors went mad trying to describe what they were seeing. The void was not a fleet. It was not an army. It was a force of nature. It was entropy given form. It was the end of everything. The first battle lasted 3 days. The combined fleet threw everything it had at the enemy. Ancient human weapons tore through the darkness. Warships fought with desperate courage. Ships from every species in the alliance died by the hundreds. But the void kept coming. It fed on despair. It grew stronger when its enemies lost hope. Every ship that fell, every life that ended made it more powerful. Moore watched the battle from the bridge of the Eternal Dawn. He understood now why the ancient humans had chosen to forget. The void was not something that could be defeated by weapons alone. It was not a physical enemy. It was an idea. It was the belief that nothing mattered, that resistance was pointless, that the end was inevitable. The only weapon against that belief was its opposite, hope, the stubborn refusal to give up even when all seemed lost. That was humanity's greatest gift, not their technology, not their power, their ability to keep fighting when every rational calculation said they should surrender. He understood the final message in the archive now. The Great Silence had not just been a strategic retreat, it had been a test. The ancient humans could have fought the void alone. They were powerful enough, but they chose a different path. They let themselves be forgotten so that the younger species could grow. They wanted those species to become strong enough to fight alongside them, not as servants but as equals. Broadcast a message to every ship in the fleet. He told them the truth. He told them that they were not fighting for survival alone. They were fighting for the right to exist. They were fighting for every star that had ever shone and every life that had ever loved. The void wanted to end all of that. They would not let it. Something changed in the battle. The despair that had been spreading through the fleet began to fade. Ships that had been retreating turned to fight. Crews that had given up found new strength. They sang old songs of defiance. The humans remembered why they had spread across the stars in the first place. The combined fleets pushed forward. Human vessels of ancient power led the charge. Warships flew at their sides. Ships from 100 other worlds followed. They were not fighting as separate species anymore. They were fighting as one family. The void broke. The darkness that had seemed endless began to retreat. It could not feed on hope. It could not grow stronger from courage. The Alliance drove it back into the emptiness between realities, back into the cold place where it had waited for 60 million years. The war was over, for now. Moore stood before the United Assembly of Worlds 6 months later. Humans and aliens sat together in the Great Hall. He spoke of the future. He spoke of the work that still needed to be done. He spoke of the wonders waiting to be rediscovered and the new wonders waiting to be created. The void would return someday, perhaps in 1,000,000 years, perhaps in 10. But this time the galaxy would be ready. Humanity had taken its place not as rulers but as guardians, the eldest siblings in a family of species. The aliens had thought they dominated the stars. They were wrong, but so would humanity be wrong to claim dominion now. The stars belonged to everyone brave enough to reach for them. And together they reached. The end.